Hello everyone, and welcome to the Crowcast preview. I'm your host Scorpus. I'm coming down with a little bit of a flu, so hopefully I can get through this alright. And with me tonight on the cast is Feenix. Hopefully you haven't come down with any sicknesses at the moment. How you doing?
Nah, sick of work. That's about it, mate. Going well. How are you? Well, you just told me how you were, so...
Yeah, not doing too well myself, but we'll push through, and we'll get to the game that is on Sunday afternoon. This is, of course, we're playing Melbourne at the MCG. The kickoff time is 3:20 for Victorian, so I guess that's 2:50 Adelaide time. The first of our two matches in a row over at the MCG. Bit of an interesting scheduling thing going on there, but whatever. Because, of course, it's a Sunday match, we only have the squads released at this stage. So for us, we're coming in. We've got Otten, Henderson, and Miller coming out. No one at this stage. I expect probably no changes. What do you think, Feenix, come tomorrow's finalisation of the teams?
I wouldn't expect any changes. Maybe, other than a forced one. Really, I mean, the two defenders are in there for cover, so that suggests that there might be a question mark over someone down back. Miller is probably the next up anyway in terms of those selected or those on the cusp. So no, I wouldn't expect any unforced changes. No.
Yeah, I agree. And we were just chatting off air just before about Otten. I think he's been really good for him in the SNFL, but he's just lost all his mobility and everything, and you can't really see him finding a spot in an AFL team at the moment, unfortunately. But we'll get to the teams from Melbourne. They've actually made two changes already. Coming out is Wagner and Oliver. Coming in, Grimes, Garlett, Mitchie, Matt Jones, and Harms. I guess the expected changes there, probably those first two ins, Grimes and Garlett coming in. Garlett probably almost certainly comes in if he's fit. Probably their best small forward in the team. There's a couple of notable omissions for both teams at the moment. We've still got Seedsman out of our best 22. He's still a couple of weeks away with his hamstring injury. And for Melbourne, they're missing a couple of guys, Dunn, Lumumba, and Salem, most notably. So that's three defenders for them out. Just going back to last year, round 3, 2015, at the Adelaide Oval, this match we won by 25 points. It was a bit of a scrappy affair. It was the infamous Bernie Vince tagging the living shit out of Dangerfield match. Jacobs had a massive 55 hit out, Sloan 31 touches, and Nathan Jones of the opposition probably best on ground for Melbourne with 25 in a losing team. Feenix, the ruck battle. I think it's probably the best place to start here because Gawn is in absolutely ripping form. How do you see him going up against Jacobs this weekend?
Yeah, it's going to be a test for both players, I think. Sauce has been up and about around the ground, so that's going to test Max's concentration out. Gawn seems to like to drift forward and get on the scoreboard, so that's going to test Sauce's engine out a bit. I think it's going to be a good battle. You'd probably say Gawn is the form ruckman of the competition at the moment.
Yeah, I have him down in my notes here as almost being an All-Australian contention, I think. I think Goldstein, just over the past couple of weeks, has really dropped off in his form, whereas Gawn, he's been really strong throughout the entire season. So I think Jacobs really has his work cut out for him this weekend up against Gawn. And probably the thing I was noticing most about Jacobs last week is that he had some really crucial marks throughout the ground. I think he really towed up Goldstein a little bit in that department. So yeah, kind of interesting for that battle.
I think Sauce has really started to concentrate on his around-the-ground work. He was a noticeable absentee in the first month of the season in that regard. So, and he's proven really valuable, not only taking contested grabs, but also being that link man, almost an additional midfielder in our transition out of defence. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting battle.
Yeah, well, Nicky always says that Jacobs is often referred to as a tall mid, so it's good to see him back in that form. I think earlier in the season he was struggling a little bit with, I think it was an elbow injury. He maybe had some surgery in the off season or something on that elbow. So maybe now that he's a bit fitter and a bit back into some form, he can start really dominating around the ground, which is his real strength, I think. What about their midfield though? Boy, looking through that lineup, we've got Jones, Tyson, Vince, Viney, Petraka. Even, Jack Trengove coming back in, Vandenberg. This is a strong lineup, Feenix. Do we have the midfield depth?
Look, I think we do. I think the key again will be application. We've seen in the last two games against West Coast and North Melbourne that our midfield, if they drop off a little bit, they can get towed up pretty quick. But we've got some really good workhorses in there. Scotty Thompson has been a great player in and under, and Rory, obviously, his numbers have spoken for themselves over the last couple of weeks. I think it'll be a matter of us concentrating and getting on top of them. It'll be interesting to see whether they choose to tag Sloaney this week. I wouldn't expect that they will. They're playing a slightly different game to last year, so I'd imagine they might put someone on a run with role, but I don't think they'll put a hard tag on Sloaney, at least initially, maybe if he gets off the chain. But Jones and Viney, two really strong midfielders, and them having Jack Trengove back in the team as well, he's given them a bit of outside alternative too, and it's so good to see Jack Trengove back playing AFL footy after such a long standout, but he can have a quiet one this week. Thanks very much.
Yeah, I mean, before his injury, I think Jack Trengove was really highly rated. I think he's played something like 80 games already, and he's still quite a young guy, despite missing those 2 full seasons pretty much with his foot injury. So, yeah, I think the really key thing that we're seeing throughout Melbourne's midfield is the strength that they have in the contested ball winners. I think they might bat maybe 1 or 2 deeper than we do in terms of those really strong inside guys. Of course, we can rotate a Sloan, a Tomo, the 2 Crouches through there as our primary ball winners. But I think maybe their main 5 of Jones, Tyson, Viney, Vince, and Petrarca is probably that 1 extra in there. The thing that of course creates is a little bit of an unbalance in Melbourne's team. As I was looking across their list, they really don't have all that many strong outside players. Guys like that we have in our team, Smith and Atkins, who've been in really good form at the moment. Sort of that Lynchy type link man, maybe even the McKay type player. They really lack those sort of players. Is that going to be an issue for them?
Look, I think it probably will actually, given our ability to block across half back and rebound. I think that's where they're going to have trouble. Just covering our transition and also being able to move the ball quickly enough to get some separation up forward. They haven't. I mean, Jesse Hogan is obviously a star in the making, but aside from him and Jack Watts has been solid. Blokes like Chris Dawes. I mean, he's been solid as well since he's come back in, but he's only a B grade player.
B grade's being very generous, Feenix. I think he's a complete spud, useless.
But he can take a grab, and he takes a player, he takes Kyle. But yeah, no. Look, I think their slower ball movement is going to be their Achilles heel, like you say, against us.
Yeah, even just looking at their backline, I mean, just for example, we look at our backline, we've got Smith there as our main delivering guy. We've been playing a little bit of McKay and Atkins back there, and we'd normally be playing Seedsman. But we've also seen some good rebound from guys like Laird, Brown, Lever throughout the season, whereas their defence, I don't see, I mean, to be honest, not even a single rebounding player in their team, and that's going to be a real issue for them. I mean, their main guys that would normally be back there would be Lumumba and Salem. Both of those guys are injured, of course. So, yeah, their defence looks really, really shaky. How about their tall defence, Feenix? They've got Tom McDonald, Oscar McDonald, and, I don't know, Sam Frost or maybe a Jack Grimes. Who's going to take our tall forwards?
No, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe Roosie might come down and play centre-half back. It'd probably be better. They're going to really struggle to contain us up forward. In terms of their transition out of defence, they rely on their midfielders getting back and working deep, and Nathan Jones in particular tends to do that very well. But given how things have gone for us in the last couple of weeks and our ability to get return inside 50s and just basically block things up and play the game in our forward half, I think, again, their lack of outside run is going to be quite evident when they're trying to move the ball out of our attacking area. Yeah,
we know Paul Roos loves to coach in a very, very contested style. He loves to create those stoppages, and we're not the weakest in terms of stoppage, but when it really gets to that outside game, as you were mentioning, yeah, they're probably going to be cut up pretty significantly. And just looking back to the game last week, just a quick look at their forwards. I mean, really the only tall defender that I really rate in their team is probably Tom McDonald, but Lance Franklin kicked 4 goals, 2 on him not last week, but the week before. Obviously, they had the bye last week, but yeah, that's not a great effort by Tom.
Well, and historically, hasn't he struggled against Tex as well? If my memory serves me correctly.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
So, yeah, look, there's nothing there that scares me in terms of their defence. In fact, I think there's the opportunity for us to have a field day up forward if our midfielders get first use. I don't think they're going to be able to contain blokes like Charlie Cameron and Eddie Betts. I think the blokes that are going to give them trouble are those hard lead-ups like Tommy Lynch and Mitchie McGovern. And I think you'll see Tex have a bit of a day out this week. I think he might be nice and fresh, and the weather's going to be reasonable, I think, in Melbourne on Sunday. So
yeah, I expect so.
Yeah. So I don't see how they can contain us unless Roos decides to make it a slog, and then it comes down to work rate.
Well, it's interesting. Just they've gone on with a very strange lineup, in my opinion. They've almost played 4 really tallish, not really tallish, kind of tall forwards in Hogan, Dawes, Watts, and Sam Frost, but they've gone in really light in the defensive zone with Tom McDonald, Oscar McDonald, and I mean they're going to probably have to play Grimes as a medium tallish defender there. It's just a really weird setup when you're coming up against the best attacking team in the competition. They really haven't thought at all about who's going to take what. I guess they're going to back in their structures there, but up against our defence, we have no trouble really containing tall players. I think that's been our key strength in the defensive zone, and to come in with 4 tall forwards against us but only 2 tall defenders just seems really weird.
Well, what it says to me, first of all, is that it's just a matter of cattle in their defence. I mean, you mentioned the outs that they've got at the moment, and Lumumba and those types. I don't think they've got the players to actually match up with us properly. And it seems to me, given the way they've set up their forward line on paper, that they're hoping for air dominance up forward for themselves, which means that they're banking on getting first use and probably just hat-kicking it forward and hoping for a mark. I mean, there's not a lot of pace in that forward line. You've probably got Garlett in there somewhere if he plays and, to give a bit of zip. But, yeah, and Benny Kennedy maybe, although I think he's been playing more midfield for them this year. But, yeah, it doesn't... You're right, it isn't balanced, but I think it's more indicative of their injuries in defence and just their overall list profile.
Yeah, it's a shame for them that they don't have that depth there to field the defenders. But I think if there's any position on the ground that is going to really trouble us on the weekend, it's probably their midfielders' abilities to play in the forward line. I mean, Dean Kent, for example, he's not a true midfielder. He's kind of a half-forward type, but he's kicked 17 goals already this season. We've seen how good Petraka is. He's an absolute gun, and he could really tear up the forward line. And even some of their other players like, Hunt, Vandenberg, we've seen kick goals. Vince is a very handy player in the forward line. So it could be a real tough task for Cheney and our mids down back.
Well, they're going to have to work hard to score a winning score, basically. It just doesn't look threatening, does it?
No,
it doesn't look threatening.
They kicked, like 4 goals last week? Or 4 goals 2 weeks ago? Yeah, 4 goals 7. That's a shocker of a score.
Yeah, and it just shows if they don't get first use, they struggle because they haven't got any rebound off half back to counter losing the midfield numbers. So, I personally think this is going to be a bit of a blowout because I don't think they match up well on us, and I think despite their midfield strength, I think we match them there with a bit more class as well. Apologies for my phone then. And I think we've got far more firepower up forward, and I think we've got their forwards covered.
Well, it's almost night and day difference in terms of the forward lines, really. But the one thing that I agree with you completely that if all goes to plan and we come out and we play our best football, even though it's away from home, we should be far too strong for Melbourne. But the thing that I always, it really always gets me when we come up against Melbourne, for some reason, it just seems to be that team in the lower part of the ladders that can really trouble us. I think last year we were probably expecting more than just a 25-point win, considering the position that Melbourne ended up finishing at the end of the year. And that game was a real slog for most of it. And of course, in 2014, we had that absolute shocking 3-point loss. We had the 96-point loss back in 2011 when Melbourne was absolutely atrocious. So is the bogey team going to be a factor for us?
Look, normally this would be exactly that kind of game. I agree with you. I think whilst they're playing it very low key with this particular issue, I think the Phil Walsh factor is going to ensure that we come out switched on and ready to go. The club has played it very low key out of respect for Phil's family, but you can bet your life, being that it's actually on the anniversary of the day it occurred, that they're going to come out and want to give a good account of themselves. I will worry more about next week against Collingwood, even though they're complete arse. That'd be the game that I'd be more concerned about. I don't think attitude and work rate and commitment are going to be an issue this week, which is usually what happens when we throw one against a lower team.
Yeah, we saw it last year with that Carlton game at the MCG, where we ended up winning. I mean, Carlton, of course, finished last, so it was good that we ended up winning, but we really just didn't show up on the day, and it was a real struggle for us, and I'm really hoping that doesn't happen this week. What about the MCG, though? We've seen us play there, I think, once already. Did we play Hawthorn? Is this our first match on the MCG?
No, we played the Hawks there, and I thought we played the ground pretty well, actually. I think in the end it was our composure that let us down, given we were up by, 2.5 goals with 4 minutes to go or something like that. So I think we'll go right on the NCG. The more games on the G, the better, as far as I'm concerned. And against lower ranked teams is a good opportunity to get a winning culture going at that ground. And I don't think the G will pose any problems for us. I don't think Melbourne particularly have much of a home ground advantage.
Yeah, I think there's been a few people on the board getting sucked in by the fact that we haven't had a great winning record in Melbourne over our history, but these are the games that, especially in our current form, our current ladder position, that we really should be winning. And I'm not the sort of person that really places a whole ton of weight on the playing interstate or playing at a different ground. I think if your brand of football is good enough and you turn up on the day, it doesn't really matter where you play. And we saw that against West Coast, of course. You know, that's a really tough road trip, and we managed to take them down there. So, yeah.
I'm with you, mate. I think if you're playing well, it doesn't matter where the grass is. You just play well, and I think we are playing well at the moment. So I don't fear the MCG at all.
Yeah, it'd be good to get a couple of games down here in Melbourne in a row as well for our Melbourne supporters like me, so we can go along if we're feeling
definitely
up to it. The final thing I wanted to touch on a little bit is perhaps a whipping boy watch. McKay and Douglas are probably the two people who've been in most trouble of losing their spots. Do you reckon they're cementing their spot over the past couple of weeks, or are they going to have to put in a big performance on the weekend?
Look, I think DMAC has been good in parts. I don't think he's been consistent. I don't think he's put through a consistent four-quarter game yet. But I think he's had good quarters and good halves. Richie Douglas, it's very hard to get a read on because, there's a school of thought that he's playing a defensive midfield role. He actually is bobbing up, but I would just expect more from a senior player who's an ex-club champion. Certainly a couple of games where he's had less than 10 posies, and even last week I don't think he had a huge possession count. You want more out of Richie. given our outs and our team balance at the moment, I still think that D-Mac is probably the one that's going to give way for Seaman when he comes back.
Yeah, I agree.
But on form, I would probably say that Richie Douglas is the one that needs to pull his finger out at the moment. And if Miller is in the wings, which team selection suggests, then Dougie, currently playing off a half-forward line, is probably vulnerable to Miller if they want to bring him back in. And I would imagine that if Dougie doesn't have a big game this week, they might slip Miller in for the Collingwood match the following week.
Yeah, I think we've got Carlton in between now and the Collingwood match, but...
Oh, that's right. Sorry, yeah. We've got Collingwood at home, haven't we? And Carlton at the G.
Yeah,
sorry.
But I agree. I think the interesting thing with Douglas is that I think his first 10 or 11 games were well below his standard that we've come to expect from Douglas. But his past couple of matches, there's been some glimpses of him getting back into the form that we know that he's capable of. I think he was very serviceable up forward last week. I mean, our whole team was pretty shocking in the forward zone, and he seemed to be able to, kick those couple of goals when we needed them. I think that, especially that nice little one where he kicked the behind and then he managed to go back and slot it, was something that we haven't seen him do previously. He's been missing those, and he kicked on the weekends. That was good. And of course, his contested marking against West Coast, I was rating quite highly. McKay, he's an interesting sort of player. I think you're right. He's probably going to make way for Seedsman, but for now, he's doing probably just enough to stay in. Who do you think?
There's not much else. There's not much else waiting in the wings to take a wing, really.
No,
is there?
Especially now that Menzel's injured.
Yeah, that's right. Dougie, I think, struggles from ball watching. To be honest with you, I think when he's out of touch, he spectates. And you'd just like to see him get a bit more involved, particularly around stoppage and forward 50 if he's playing up forward more, as a high percentage of his game time. So it'd be interesting to see how he plays this week.
Yeah, definitely. Who do you see winning this match, and what do you reckon the margin?
Look, as I said before, I think we'll end up comfortable winners. I think they'll take it to us in the first half, but I don't think they've got the class to go with us, and I don't think they've got the speed, which is interesting for a Crows team to talk about speed, but we do move the ball very well, and we do have a couple of lads who can burn up the grass. So I don't think they can go with us on transition, and I think at the end they'll just run out of puff, and I would imagine we'll win running away with it by probably about 6 goals.
Yeah, I agree with you on most facets there. I think we have the advantage in a number of facets of the game. I think one of the things you probably didn't mention was I think we have superior fitness over the Melbourne team, and if it comes down to needing to win it in the last quarter or the last half or something like that, I think we have the better fitness has been shown in the last couple of matches. The speed across the ground and our ball usage in particular, we're really clamped down on the amount that we've been serving up clangers in that back half area. We've been not conceding nearly as many inside 50s. We've been much cleaner with our possession in general, and I think that will really trouble Melbourne, who are a slower team in terms of their ball movement. And I think we just have the speed to do it. I'm not sure whether we'll be winning by a sort of 10-goal margin like we would have tipped probably in the last couple of years coming up against Melbourne, but it'd be good to see, as you said, at least a 6-goal win. I guess this brings us to a little interlude section with Game of Crows. So, not a very successful week last week. Everyone's tips were crap. So, there we go.
It's very clinical analysis there, Scorpus.
I think the issue was a lot of people were tipping it to be a very wet weather game. We saw a lot of predictions of really high tackle counts, those sort of things. Unfortunately, though, it was a dryish match, so really nothing got up. Of course, for those of you who aren't aware of Game of Crows, it's our little prediction game for the upcoming Crows match. You can make either the bold claim for 1 point, the crazy claim for 3 points. Winner at the end of the season gets that case of beer sent to them. You can enter through Spreaker, Twitter, Facebook, or Big Footy. Our current leaderboard still has Joel Constable sitting up at the top with 5 points. Mr. Mystery Guest Bonkers and Vardy Magic all on 1 point. I thought my tip last week of Brad Crouch with his season high disposals of 24 plus would get up. I was really Really disappointed to see him only get 20, so that'll be my prediction again this week. I think he'll get a season high count for disposals. What about you, Phoenix?
He's only getting mid to high 60s time on ground at the moment, so he's going to have to play well to rack up those numbers. I am actually tipping that this is going to be the week, Scorpus. Jake Lever is going to score his first goal in AFL football. I can see us pushing that defensive line up to the middle of the ground and forcing turnovers, and I think the Snake's going to sneak one in this week.
That'll be a call for celebration. I think we'll have to send him a cake or something, because as we saw in his interview on Tuesday Night Live those couple of weeks back, he was really craving that first goal in AFL footy.
Yeah, that's right.
Especially if he can get it ahead of Kyle Hartigan, who also hasn't kicked a goal. So,
and Cheney, the two Kyles, I think, are at his heels at the moment. So, and if he happens to incorporate a bit of candy into it, it might be double points, surely.
It'll be magical if he can pull some candy and kick one from outside 50. I think that'll be a highlight of the game. But yeah, of course, I think Brown and Talia, the two defenders who've kicked goals for us this year, as far as the lockdown defenders go. So it'll be really good if Lever can get up. I'll be backing in Brad Crouch, but I'll be really, really hoping to see Lever get up as well. It'll be nice for us both to get some points on the board, but for everyone else, you can enter through the usual ways, and hopefully we can get a couple more points and really take down Joel. Moving on, I think got a SNFL team playing North Adelaide at Saturday, 2:10 p.m. Prospect Oval. This is not a televised match, unfortunately. Missing from our team, we still got a couple of guys out. Knight, ankle injury. Shaw with his concussion still out. It's been since about round 4. So, yeah, getting really serious for him. Hampton and Seedsman both out for the next 1 to 2 weeks. Van Berlo, he injured himself in the last SNFL match with a foot injury. He'll be out for 4 to 6 weeks. So I think that probably almost rules him out for the rest of the season in terms of even SNFL form. Could this be a career-ending injury for Van Berlo?
No, I don't know about career-ending. The club's shown that they have a lot of time for him, not only as a player but as a club man. I would imagine he'd be retained on our list, but I think he will. He certainly is out of best 22 calculations now, and I think he's slipped probably outside best 25 calculations now, really. So I would imagine the next season he'll be an SANFL player, maybe SANFL captain, and just be there as a break glass type of scenario. Do
you see him retiring at the end of this season? I mean, he's out of contract at the moment, so it is kind of that decision where we'd have to either recontract him or he'll have to be moved on. Is retirement something you reckon he's thinking about?
Oh, look, I don't think it'll be something he would be thinking about. He doesn't seem like the type to pull up stumps. I think he'll be trying as hard as he can to force his way back into the AFL team, which is admirable. So, no, I think the club might put him on a 1-year contract just for insurance purposes, I think, and then we might see him retire at the end of 2017.
So long as any 1-year contract has the stipulation that he's not immediately played in round 1, and he's definitely a break-in case of emergency type player. But I think the club is moving in that sort of direction at the moment in being really solid with their list management team across the board. And I think if they were to keep Van Berlo on, I don't think we'd run into the Crows of old mentality where we'd be trying to bring in Van Berlo every single week. I think we'd probably manage him properly like we're doing it at the moment.
The interesting thing in the Adelaide team, and I know I think it's just a squad, or it might be a 22. I'm not sure. All of Henderson, Otten, and Miller have been named. So it'll be interesting to see who the travelling emergency is. But they've all been named at this stage.
Yeah, if I was having a guess at who would be the travelling emergency, I'd probably say Ricky Henderson. I think the club has probably seen enough of him in the SNFL to know what he's going to bring, especially because he's been in pretty good form there. Whereas Miller, I think he needs a couple more weeks in the SNFL. He wasn't super prolific last week. I think he didn't manage to kick a goal, and only had a couple of possessions, or maybe 10 or so possessions. So he was a travelling emergency already for the West Coast match, I think. So I think he'll probably stay, and I think Otten will probably stay due to our defensive issues in the SNFL. Yep. I think did we win last? No, we got tailed up last week in the SNFL.
We got smacked by the Doggies last week, which was an interesting result.
There was one thing I wanted to bring up about the SNFL. Because we've used so few players, so we're sitting about 27 or 28 players that we've used in the AFL, is this becoming a motivation issue for some of our guys in the SNFL? Do they have the motivation to keep trying to push themselves to get into the team?
Look, I think it's a positional thing. I think you would find that if you're playing up forward for the Adelaide SANFL team, you're not seeing a lot of openings there unless you're a Wayne Miller or maybe a Troy Menzel. And similarly, down back, you'd be tripping someone over at training if you were feeling like a game, because in terms of structure, we're pretty right and pretty set. I'd be disappointed if blokes like Ellis Yeoman and Wigg and even Grigg, although he's miles off as far as I'm concerned, wouldn't be pushing to be next cab off the rank from a midfield point of view. Brad Crouch has come back and improved last week in the second half, and you'd want him to continue to improve. But, he has been injury prone. Scotty Thompson's going to need a break at some point, and there's always the possibility, touch wood, of an injury. So you'd want our top line SANFL midfielders to be pushing hard. But you're right. It can be. I reckon it could be a long season for those guys with such a set AFL team.
Yeah, and even with our side being so set at the moment, we seem to have a couple of people who have been rotating through sort of our injured positions and also that sort of really top-line SNFL, almost fringe AFL position. Like, for example, we've had McKay in the SNFL for a game while he was injured, but we managed to bring in guys like Lyons who, early in the season were in the SNFL. We've had Henderson come in and play a role, Miller come in and play a role as well. So it seems like those guys that are just a step below those sort of players seem like they're miles and miles away from selection at the moment. Even though I agree, I would really like to see Wigg in particular getting a game against one of the lesser teams that we're playing late in the season, like a Brisbane or an Essendon at home, just to give them that little taste of AFL football, see what they can do at the level and introduce them in a more friendly way. Unless, of course, we get injuries, which would present a quicker way to get them into the team. Yeah. But even resting, maybe a Matty Crouch would need a rest, or a Tomo again, or a Douglas.
Certainly Tomo, I think, comes out at some point. What game they choose to rest Tomo, I would imagine they'd rest. If they're going to rest Tomo again, I reckon it would be the Bombers game, which is, I think, the end of July, isn't it?
Yes, that would be after his 300th as well. So his 300th being the Collingwood match. So, it'd be interesting to see if we start rotating some players. I think you can't really go and start messing too much with the teams, even when we're playing lesser teams. I think it could be an issue in interrupting people's form and everything. But to be honest, we're in such good form. We have a strong enough team. I think it's possible to at least give that 22nd or 21st spot to a developing player at some point, especially against those lower teams. So
agree.
Yeah, and Vardy Magic in the chat says Grigg looks overweight and slow, and I'd agree. I've seen some of his SNFL games this year, at least the ones that have been televised or streamed, and it's been a complete difference to him in the past couple of seasons. He looks like he's really lost that elite kick that he used to have, and I think that's a real shame.
The knock on Grigg has always been that if he's not 100% committed, he drops off very quickly. Both in terms of fitness and skills. And I think, given that he has bumped back down in the pecking order, he's seen the club recruit a couple of midfielders. The Crouch boys have overtaken him. And to be honest with you, I think Mitch Grigg can see the writing on the wall, and I don't think he wants an AFL career enough, to be honest with you. I think I just don't think he wants it enough. And it's a pity for him, because you could probably see him slotting him into a 22 of another club, such as a Brisbane or someone like that. But he's not going to get the opportunity because he's just not going to put in the yards. And I would imagine that he's not far off of D-list calculations, perhaps not this year, but certainly next year.
I think at this stage he's almost a lock for being delisted, to be honest. I mean, the only midfield player of his sort of position as an inside midfielder that I'd have below Grigg at the moment is Dean Gore. But of course, he's really new to our system and he's a very fresh player from the draft. I mean, he's only in his second year of football. So
exactly.
I mean, I think one of the really disappointing things if looking at our team at the moment from his perspective is the fact that Jared Lyons is currently playing in the AFL team. I think that's probably really, he last season and some of the previous seasons, he's really been fighting with Jared Lyons for a spot in the team, and to see him cemented, to see Matty Crouch cemented in the team, he must be thinking, geez, I'm so far away from selection at the moment, and Ellis Yolman's been tearing up the SANFL. Wig has been the emergency, I think, once or twice maybe. So even he's pushing up into contention, and he's not going to be getting a game on the outside either with our Menzels, Millerers, and Hendersons waiting in the wings. So, yeah.
Well, and I think that's the problem with Griggy. He is relatively outside, but he hasn't got the pace.
No,
he's at his best, he's got poise not dissimilar to Rory Atkins, perhaps not quite as dynamic as Rat, but he is that type of player. But he's just not getting enough of it, and as you say, his fitness is questionable. So he's not going to get a game on the outside. He's certainly not going to get a game on the inside. And he's at the crossroads, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting mentioning him as an outside player because in previous seasons when we've had that real lack of outside quality, he's a sort of player that you'd want to use as that sort of slower outside play if you needed to find someone slower because of his elite kick.
Yeah, the distributor.
But the fact now that we have those players like Atkins in particular, I think has really cemented his spot on the side at the moment. With a little bit of pace and that elite kick that, I mean, even Knight, which some people are mentioning as well. I mean, he's been injured.
I was just about to say, not forgetting Rolling Knight, because he's got a bit of class about him, and if he can get over this bloody ankle, he pushes up ahead of Griggy instantly as well. Instantly. So,
it's just really unfortunate for Grigg, and I think he's probably one of the first to go, unfortunately. A bit of a almost a Brodie Martin situation, but...
Yep, you're right there.
Been on the list for a long time, never really cemented himself, capable when needed, but unfortunately just not quite good enough to really cement himself.
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of an interesting discussion about our depth there. Guess that offsets some of the less interesting matches in this bye week. There's a lot of spudbusters.
One other thing I noticed in the SANFL selections, Benny Jarman's in the twos for North, so people don't need to get too hyped about the father-son prospects of Ben Jarman. I think he'll be good, but he's certainly a lot of his dad's or his uncle's class, I don't think. Yeah,
interesting, but with Ben Jarman, I was watching probably the first under-18 game I've ever seen in my entire life, and he was playing... I think against one of the Victorian teams, Vic Country maybe, and he seems very, very small forward, if you know what I mean. Like not really versatile enough to play in any other positions. So
I think he's 179.
Yeah,
he's under 180, I think.
I'm pretty sure he's under 180, and I don't think he has the tank or the real ability, I guess, at the moment to play through the midfield zone. So if anything, you'd be thinking maybe third round selection or later for him. But
one of those natural footballer, just like his old man. But unfortunately, the game's moved on from that, isn't it? And you need a bit more firepower than just the ability to have a sublime kick or handball. Well, Hawthorn might take him; he fits right into their structure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Stephen Pittman in the chat says that we shouldn't talk down the kid all that much yet, and I agree. I mean, there's still a fair bit of the season to go in terms of the under-18s. And I still think we probably will end up drafting him just to get that first father-son selection because, I mean, the value of a late-round selection really isn't that much. So whether we use a rookie selection doesn't really matter. I mean, it'd be great to see a Jarman on the list again.
I mean, the comparison is obviously a bloke like Jack Trengove, who was playing in the ones for Sturt and not just playing, but being a key part of the team as an 18-year-old before he was drafted. You know that's where you compare when it comes to your first rounders, particularly out of the SANFL. And obviously Ben's not up to that standard. I would say late second, early third, and that would probably only be the case given depending on how the bid goes with Hawthorn.
Yeah. Anyway, I guess we'll be talking a lot more about those sort of selections at the end of the season. But I did want to touch on, we're coming on 40 minutes now, I still did want to touch on some of the other matches from the round. Like I mentioned, a couple of Spud Busters, Port versus Richmond Friday night, Feenix. I think Port will probably take this one out.
No, Richmond will win.
You reckon?
Yep.
How much?
Yeah, it's almost my what do they do on the footy show? The lock of the week. I reckon Richmond will win by 5 goals. I think Port are absolute shite.
Yeah, it could be a situation where they've been drinking too much of their bathwater, and they're very, very known for drinking too much of their own bathwater. So, yeah, it could be a danger game. I'll still be tipping Port. I think Richmond are also very, very shite. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting one tomorrow night.
I actually can't believe that they dropped Paul Stewart. He's been playing all right. And I know they had to bring Humpch back in, but Jesus. You
think they'd drop Cam O'Shea or someone even more rubbish than Stewart?
Yeah, that's what I would have thought. So interesting selections. The Tigers are a bit short. They've lost Hampson and Townsend in, but they've lost their ruck. So if Big Ivan makes a return, and they got Griffiths back, who's a spud. But I reckon the Tigers will get up. And interestingly, if you look at the history, and I know this is just a talking point, but Richmond have won 2 of their last 4 against Port, and the last win against Port was actually at Adelaide Oval in the early round of 2015. And the Power beat the Tigers last year at the G, so earlier this year at the G. So I reckon the Tigers get up.
Yeah. It'll be one to watch, I think that's for sure. An interesting one. Maybe I'll slip further down the tipping from that game.
Tipping? What the hell?
I'm still worried about my tipping. I'm still almost at the top of the leaderboard, so every tip kind of counts, but I've been slipping the past couple of weeks. Anyway, Sydney versus Bulldogs, probably a game of the round if you're not going to be watching Adelaide Melbourne. This is Saturday twilight at the SCG. I think Sydney will be far too strong for the Bulldogs at home.
Yeah, you would think so. Really interesting game. Bulldogs seem to have turned over their selections a fair bit. They've dropped what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, plus one out with an injury. They've got Johannesson back, so he provides them a bit of run. I don't think the SCG suits the Bulldogs very much. So I would expect the Sydney Swans to get up fairly comfortably. Although the Bulldogs won last year at the G, so there you go. Blows me out of the water.
Yeah, I mean, the Bulldogs haven't been too bad away from home, but I just think the Sydney streak through the midfield and the up forward will probably be a bit much of the Bulldogs. How about Gold Coast versus St Kilda very quickly, Saturday Arvo at Metricon? Who's winning this one?
I reckon Gold Coast might get up. I know the Saints played really well last week, but I think Gold Coast are getting the band back together up there and playing at Metricon. I'm not inclined to tip against them for the rest of the year at home.
Yep, I'd agree. I think Gold Coast have they've looked much better over the past couple of weeks. I think I was pretty disappointed in them in the last couple of weeks not being able to actually translate their good form into a victory, unfortunately, but I think there'll be a real struggle for St Kilda going up there. St Kilda, of course, have been in pretty good form as well, so it'll be a close one, another sort of almost spud buster there. And Collingwood versus Carlton at the MCG Saturday night. A lot of people have been tipping Collingwood, but I'll be going very firmly with Carlton.
Yeah, no, don't underestimate Carlton's form. I think they're travelling all right, and Collingwood are arse, and despite their recent efforts, I think they'll get towed up by the Blues.
Oh, mate, they're not just the arse, they're the full-on colon, rectum, and entire lower intestine system. They are absolute shit. And even last week, where they destroyed Fremantle, they looked absolutely awful in their demolition of an even worse team. So yeah. I don't rate Collingwood at all. Don't rate Nathan Buckley as a coach. Don't rate their list. Don't rate their forwards. Don't rate their defence. Yep, Carlton for the win on the Saturday night.
Bombers are up by 3. Just at the start of the second quarter at Domain.
Yeah, interesting one. Because before we were discussing, how many people are going to tune in live to the Crowcast this week, considering there's this awful match on over at Domain Stadium, and it turns out it's been a little bit closer than I was expecting. So
yeah, still not going to watch it though.
Nope, still won't watch it either. I guess that brings us to the end of the Crowcast preview, though. It's been a good one this week. Don't forget to follow us on all our social feeds, Twitter at BF Crowcast and Facebook BF Crowcast. We're on iTunes. Give us a review, because apparently that makes it easier for people who are also fans of AFL podcasts and the Adelaide Crows and everything to find us on that platform. So those sort of reviews really help us. And if you've got any Adelaide Crows mates, tell them, I guess, about the Crowcast as well, because it'd be good to get some more listeners to not just this show, but also Tuesday Night Live, the Sunday review cast with you, Feenix, after our match, and of course the Crowbar as well. So I guess we'll be seeing you live 7 p.m. Adelaide time for the review after our match, Feenix.
You will, mate. I don't know who's on this week, but hopefully it won't be just me.
I think my voice will be probably completely shattered by then.
You'll be cactus, yeah. No, I think Nicky's on this Sunday and probably Macca. So it should be, hopefully we'll be reviewing a win.
Yep, I expect you will be reviewing a win. So tune in for that, everyone, and we will see you next week, same time, and which is, of course, 7:30 p.m. Adelaide time. So we'll see you next week.
Night, guys.